Somewhere around 2000 BC, on the grasslands of what is now Russia and Kazakhstan, someone figured out how to make a wheel lighter. And not just the wheel itself, wheels had existed for centuries. Solid wood wheels had been used on heavy ox carts since before 3000 BC. But this was different. This was a wheel with spokes, a thin rim connected by spokes to a central hub. Less wood, less weight, dramatically more speed. And that one engineering innovation, a spoked wheel, is the moment the Bronze Age changed forever. Because this made war chariots possible, and the war chariot remade every army and every battlefield in the ancient world for the next 800 years. The earliest evidence for the true war chariot comes from the Sintashta culture, a civilization on the Eurasian steppe, a civilization that most people probably have never heard of. Burial sites in the region around Chelyabinsk, Russia, dating to approximately 2000 BC, contain the oldest confirmed chariot burials ever found. And not just wheels, full chariots placed in graves alongside the horses. These people were farmers, they were warriors, they were mobile focused, and they had figured out how to weaponize speed. From the Eurasian steppe, the chariot technology spread west and south, and by 1700 BC, it had reached the ancient Near East. And the civilization that brought it to Egypt was a group called the Hyksos. The Hyksos are one of the most fascinating and underappreciated stories in ancient history. They were a Semitic people from the Levant, roughly modern-day Syria, Lebanon, and Canaan. They had migrated into Egypt gradually, settled in the Nile Delta region, and then around 1650 BC simply took control. No massive conquest, no single decisive battle. They just had better technology. They had the chariot, and they also had composite bows. Bows made of layered materials that were far more powerful than the simple wooden bows that the Egyptians were using. They had bronze weapons more advanced than what Egypt had at this time. They used all of it to establish the 15th and 16th dynasties of Egypt, the so-called Hyksos pharaohs, ruling from their capital at Avaris in the Nile Delta. Egypt, the greatest civilization on earth, was ruled by foreigners for over 100 years. Eventually, the Egyptians did push them out. A pharaoh named Ahmose I drove the Hyksos from Egypt around 1550 BC. But here's the most critical part of this story. Egypt didn't just expel Hyksos, they also adopted their technology. After driving out the people who brought the chariot, the Egyptians became the greatest chariot army in the entire world. They studied the design meticulously. They refined it. They made the Egyptian chariot. It was lighter. It was faster. It was more maneuverable than anything that had ever come before it. The standard Egyptian war chariot had two wheels. It was manned by two men, a driver and an archer, and it was pulled by two horses. The archer stood with a composite bow, and it could fire accurately while the chariot was moving at full speed. This was a mobile weapons platform, and the Egyptians fielded thousands of them. The full measure of what the chariot meant becomes clear in 1274 BC at a place called Kadesh. The Battle of Kadesh is considered the largest chariot battle in the history of the ancient world. The two armies, Egypt under Pharaoh Ramses II, who would go on to reign for 66 years and become the most celebrated pharaoh in history, against the Hittite Empire under its king Muwatalli II. The two greatest powers of the Bronze Age meeting in the field of what is modern-day Syria. The battle involved approximately 5,000 chariots. 5,000 chariots. I mean, if you could just imagine, like, the noise and the sound of just iron wheels, hooves, men and horses screaming. It was probably unlike anything that the soldiers of that time had ever experienced in their lives. And here's what actually happened at Kadesh, because the official Egyptian account and the military reality are two very different stories. Ramses II advanced with his army divided into 4 divisions, and the Hittites sneakily had concealed their chariot forces behind the city of Kadesh so Ramses II wouldn't know. And they waited until Ramses II's vanguard division was completely isolated and exposed, and they hit it with a massive surprise attack. The Egyptian vanguard broke apart, soldiers fled, and Ramses II himself was barely escaped and was almost captured. By his own later inscription, Ramses claims he called upon the god Amun and then fought his way out. The Egyptian records make this day a great victory, and the Hittites also record this day as a victory. Both sides say that they won, and the truth appears to be that it was a brutal and costly draw. Neither side was decisive at Kadesh, and about 15 years later, in 1259 BC, Ramses II and the Hittite king Hattusili III signed a peace treaty. It was called the Treaty of Kadesh, and it's the oldest known international peace treaty in the history of the world. Both sides agreed to non-aggression, mutual defense, and the extradition of refugees. A copy of this treaty, carved in hieroglyphics at Karnak and preserved on a clay tablet in Akkadian, is so significant that a reproduction of it hangs on the wall of the United Nations building in New York today. The Bronze Age's greatest chariot battle ended in the world's first peace treaty. But the chariot's era of dominance was already quickly running out, and around 1200 BC, the same period as the Bronze Age collapse, the military landscape dramatically changes. You get the introduction of the Sea Peoples and other groups fight in ways that the chariots just aren't built to handle. Dense infantry formations, you're getting close quarters combat, and different terrain that chariots just can't operate in. And as the Bronze Age transitions into the Iron Age, as cheaper, harder iron weapons become available to more people, the chariot loses its decisive advantage. Infantry with iron weapons can do what bronze-tipped arrows couldn't. The weapon that had dominated warfare for 800 years was made obsolete not by a better chariot, but just by men on foot who had finally figured out how to fight back. The Sintashta people who buried chariots with their dead around 2000 BC had really no way of knowing that the wheel they had lightened would drive the armies of Egypt, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Canaanites. They had no way of knowing that it would carry Ramses II almost to his death at Kadesh and then carry him back. That it would shape the biblical world, that the Philistines who arrived by sea had fought as infantry against Egyptian chariots, that the Israelites would later battle Canaanite chariot forces, that Solomon would eventually maintain his own chariot cities. A spoked wheel on the grasslands of Russia 4,000 years ago. And the echo of it runs through every army, every empire, and every battle story you have ever read. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.